The Lucifer Effect, written and published by Ngasline. In the labyrinth of human morality lies a chilling paradox that haunts our understanding of good and evil, how ordinary, decent people can gradually transform into perpetrators of cruelty and malevolence. This phenomenon, dubbed the Lucifer Effect, reveals that the line between virtue and vice isn't drawn by extraordinary acts of rebellion, but through subtle compromises, institutional pressures, and the quiet erosion of moral boundaries that can occur in anyone's life. Like a masterful sculptor who shapes clay through barely perceptible touches, situational forces, and systemic pressures can gradually mold ethical individuals into participants in activities they once would have condemned. Yet understanding this psychological alchemy offers more than just insight into darkness. It provides a map for safeguarding our humanity, revealing that the path to evil isn't paved with dramatic choices, but with small decisions that seem insignificant until they accumulate into a transformative force. Lesson 1. Evil acts start with small compromises. The path to unethical behavior rarely begins with a dramatic leap into wrongdoing. Instead, it typically starts with minor compromises that seem insignificant at the time. These small concessions to convenience, self-interest, or external pressure create tiny cracks in our moral foundation that gradually widen into dangerous fissures. Understanding this progression is crucial for maintaining ethical behavior and preventing more serious transgressions. Consider how a generally honest employee might begin by taking a few office supplies home, rationalizing it as a minor issue since everyone does it. Over time, this same person might progress to falsifying small expense reports, then manipulating financial records, and eventually engaging in serious fraud. Each step along this downward spiral feels like a natural progression from the previous one, making it difficult to identify the precise moment when behavior crosses from acceptable to unethical. The process of moral decline often involves sophisticated self-deception. We humans excel at justifying our actions, especially when they benefit us directly. These justifications often take the form of seemingly reasonable explanations. It's just this once, no one will be hurt. Or I deserve this. These rationalizations serve as psychological bridges, allowing us to engage in behaviors that would otherwise conflict with our moral self-image. The normalization of unethical behavior occurs gradually through a process called moral disengagement. This psychological mechanism allows people to commit harmful acts without experiencing the distress that would typically accompany such behavior. Through moral disengagement, individuals reframe their actions using euphemistic language, minimize their responsibility, or dehumanize those affected by their choices. Warning signs of moral decline often manifest subtly. One common indicator is the increasing frequency of rationalizations for questionable behavior. When someone finds themselves regularly explaining away actions they once would have considered wrong, they're likely sliding down the slippery slope. Another red flag is the growing comfort with minor ethical violations, particularly when accompanied by a dismissive attitude toward others' concerns about such behavior. The workplace often provides fertile ground for these small compromises. In competitive environments, the pressure to meet targets, outperform colleagues, or advance professionally can make ethical shortcuts seem increasingly attractive. What begins as cutting corners to meet a deadline might evolve into more serious violations of professional ethics. The challenge lies in recognizing these situations early and maintaining firm ethical boundaries despite external pressures. Social influences play a significant role in this progression. When others around us engage in questionable behavior without apparent consequences, it becomes easier to justify similar actions. This effect is particularly powerful when authority figures or respected colleagues model such behavior, implicitly suggesting its acceptability within the organizational culture. Prevention requires conscious attention to our decisions and their underlying motivations. Maintaining ethical behavior demands regular self-reflection and honest assessment of our choices. It's essential to recognize that each small compromise creates momentum toward larger transgressions, and that the best defense is maintaining clear ethical boundaries from the start. Developing a strong ethical compass involves establishing personal red lines, clear boundaries that we commit to never crossing regardless of circumstances. These boundaries should be established thoughtfully during periods of clarity, not in the heat of tempting situations. They serve as crucial reference points when facing ethical dilemmas and help prevent the gradual erosion of moral standards. The journey from ethical behavior to serious wrongdoing is rarely a sudden transformation, but rather a series of small steps down a slippery slope. By understanding this progression and remaining vigilant against seemingly minor compromises, individuals can better protect themselves from more serious ethical violations. The key lies in recognizing that every ethical choice, no matter how small, contributes to the formation of our character and influences our future decisions. Lesson 2. Good people turn bad in bad systems. The transformation of ethical individuals into participants of harmful actions often occurs not through individual choice alone, but through the powerful influence of organizational systems and structures. When good people enter environments corrupted by toxic cultures, misaligned incentives, or systemic misconduct, their moral compass can gradually shift without them fully realizing the change. Organizations shape behavior through both formal and informal mechanisms. Formal structures include policies, procedures, reward systems, and reporting hierarchies. These seemingly neutral administrative tools can inadvertently encourage unethical behavior when they prioritize results over methods, emphasize short-term gains over long-term sustainability, or create pressures that make it difficult to maintain ethical standards. For instance, aggressive sales targets might push honest employees toward deceptive practices, or strict hierarchies might discourage reporting of misconduct. Informal aspects of organizational culture can be even more influential. The unwritten rules, accepted practices, and social norms within a workplace often have a stronger impact on behavior than official policies. When unethical practices become normalized through phrases like "everyone does it" or "that's just how things work here," individuals may gradually adopt these behaviors to fit in or succeed within the system. This normalization process can be so subtle that people don't recognize their own ethical deterioration until they're deeply entrenched in problematic practices. Systemic corruption occurs when organizational structures and cultures actively enable or encourage unethical behavior. This might manifest as leadership turning a blind eye to misconduct, reward systems that incentivize cutting corners, or social pressure to participate in questionable practices. Once established, these systems can be self-perpetuating, as those who succeed within them often rise to positions of power and continue the cycle. The impact of bad systems on good people is particularly insidious because it operates through multiple psychological mechanisms. Social proof leads people to look to others for cues about appropriate behavior. When surrounded by unethical conduct, individuals may begin to question their own moral standards rather than the environment. Authority figures within the system can provide apparent legitimacy to questionable practices, making it easier for individuals to rationalize their participation. Recognizing dangerous environments before becoming compromised is crucial. Warning signs include persistent gaps between stated values and actual practices, retaliation against those who raise concerns, celebration of results without regard for methods, and pressure to compromise ethical standards just this once. Other red flags might be the normalization of small ethical violations, lack of transparency in decision-making, or an atmosphere of fear and silence around certain topics. Protection against corrupt systems requires both awareness and action. People must maintain clear ethical boundaries and regularly assess whether their environment aligns with their values. This might mean seeking allies who share similar concerns, documenting problematic practices, or building networks outside the organization to maintain perspective. Sometimes, the most ethical choice is to leave a corrupt system rather than risk gradual corruption. Organizations themselves can take steps to prevent systemic corruption by creating structures that support ethical behavior. This includes clear accountability mechanisms, protection for whistleblowers, transparent decision-making processes, and leadership that consistently models ethical conduct. Regular ethical assessments and open discussions about moral challenges can help identify and address potential systemic issues before they become entrenched. Understanding how systems influence behavior is not about absolving individual responsibility, but rather recognizing the powerful forces that can lead good people astray. By acknowledging these influences, individuals can better prepare themselves to resist corruption, and organizations can work to create environments that bring out the best in their members rather than enabling their worst tendencies. Lesson 3. Power corrupts even the kindest souls. The allure of power has been a fascinating aspect of human nature throughout history. Even the most benevolent individuals can find themselves transformed when given authority over others. This transformation often begins subtly, with small changes in behavior that gradually escalate into more significant departures from one's original moral compass. When individuals ascend to positions of power, they frequently experience a shift in their perception of others. Research has shown that power can reduce empathy and increase self-focused behavior. Leaders may start viewing their subordinates as means to an end rather than as fellow human beings deserving of respect and consideration. This psychological distance creates a breeding ground for potential abuse of power. The psychology of authority reveals several common patterns in how power affects human behavior. People in authority tend to overestimate their own abilities and judgment while underestimating the capabilities of others. They become more likely to dismiss opposing viewpoints and less willing to consider alternative perspectives. This cognitive bias can lead to poor decision-making and a gradual erosion of ethical standards. Warning signs of power abuse often manifest in seemingly innocent ways. A leader might begin by making exceptions to rules for themselves, justifying these exceptions as necessary for efficiency or the greater good. They might become increasingly isolated from feedback, surrounding themselves with people who reinforce their decisions rather than challenge them. Personal criticism may be met with disproportionate defensive reactions, and transparency in decision-making might decrease. Maintaining integrity while holding positions of power requires constant vigilance and self-reflection. Leaders must actively seek out and listen to diverse perspectives, especially those that challenge their own views. They need to establish personal accountability measures and regular check-ins with trusted advisors who can provide honest feedback about their leadership style and decisions. The corrupting influence of power often manifests in the deterioration of relationships. Leaders might start treating longtime colleagues differently, becoming more demanding and less understanding. They might use their position to avoid difficult conversations or responsibilities, delegating uncomfortable tasks to others while taking credit for successes. These behavioral changes can create a toxic environment that affects entire organizations. Power can also distort one's sense of reality. Those in authority may begin to believe they are exempt from normal rules and standards of behavior. This sense of exceptionalism can lead to increasingly risky or unethical decisions, justified by a belief in one's superior judgment or special circumstances. The feedback loop of power and privilege can create a dangerous spiral of moral compromise. To combat these tendencies, leaders must cultivate specific habits and practices. Regular self-assessment and reflection on the use of power are essential. Creating systems of checks and balances within their sphere of influence helps prevent abuse of authority. Maintaining strong personal relationships outside of their power structure can provide grounding and perspective. Understanding the psychology of power can help individuals recognize and resist its corrupting influence. By acknowledging that no one is immune to these effects, leaders can take proactive steps to protect themselves and their organizations from the darker aspects of authority. This includes establishing clear ethical guidelines, encouraging open dialogue, and creating mechanisms for accountability at all levels. The path to maintaining integrity in leadership positions requires continuous effort and awareness. Leaders must regularly examine their motivations and actions, seeking to align them with their core values and ethical principles. Building a culture of transparency and mutual respect can help create an environment where power serves its intended purpose of enabling positive change rather than corrupting those who wield it. Power itself is neutral. It's how we choose to use it that determines its impact on ourselves and others. By understanding the psychological mechanisms at play and implementing proper safeguards, even those in positions of significant authority can maintain their moral compass and use their influence for the benefit of all. Lesson 4. Situations shape character more than we think. We often pride ourselves on having an unwavering moral compass, believing our character remains constant regardless of circumstances. However, extensive research and real-world examples demonstrate that situations exert a far more powerful influence on our behavior than most people realize. The environment we find ourselves in can dramatically affect our decisions, actions, and even our core values. Consider how different people behave during natural disasters. Ordinarily law-abiding citizens might loot stores when resources become scarce, while others demonstrate remarkable altruism by risking their lives to help strangers. The same person who acts honestly in everyday situations might bend rules when under extreme pressure at work or rationalize unethical behavior during a crisis. This malleability of character under different circumstances isn't a sign of weak morality. It's a fundamental aspect of human nature that we must understand to protect ourselves from moral drift. Social context plays a particularly powerful role in shaping behavior. When surrounded by others who engage in questionable practices, people tend to adjust their moral standards to match the group's norms. This adaptation occurs gradually and often unconsciously. A new employee joining a workplace where minor expense report padding is common might initially feel uncomfortable, but eventually accept and participate in the practice, especially if respected colleagues present it as normal behavior. The pressure to conform to situational demands can override individual moral inclinations through various mechanisms. Time pressure, authority figures, peer expectations, and perceived necessity can all combine to create powerful situational forces that push people toward actions they would normally condemn. Professional environments are particularly potent in this regard, as they often involve hierarchical structures, performance pressures, and complex social dynamics that can make it difficult to maintain ethical clarity. Environmental cues also influence our behavior in subtle but significant ways. Studies have shown that people are more likely to act dishonestly in dimly lit rooms than in well-lit spaces, and that disorder in the environment can increase the likelihood of rule-breaking behavior. Even seemingly minor factors like room temperature or background noise can affect decision-making processes and moral judgments. Understanding the power of situations doesn't excuse unethical behavior, but it does highlight the importance of creating environments that support rather than undermine moral conduct. Organizations and individuals must recognize that relying solely on personal character is insufficient. We need to actively design situations that make it easier to do the right thing and harder to do wrong. This understanding also calls for greater humility about our own moral fortitude. Rather than assuming we would never engage in unethical behavior, we should acknowledge our vulnerability to situational influences and prepare accordingly. This means developing strategies to recognize when we're in potentially compromising situations and having predetermined plans for handling such challenges. The role of situations in shaping character also has implications for leadership and organizational design. Leaders must focus not only on hiring ethical individuals, but also on creating environments that reinforce ethical behavior. This includes establishing clear moral guidelines, providing appropriate support systems, and ensuring that organizational pressures don't inadvertently encourage misconduct. Recognizing the power of situations over character doesn't mean we're helpless against environmental influences. Instead, this knowledge empowers us to be more proactive in managing our exposure to potentially corrupting situations and in strengthening our ethical defenses. By understanding how situations shape behavior, we can better prepare ourselves to maintain our moral standards even under challenging circumstances and work to create environments that bring out the best rather than the worst in people. Lesson 5. Standing alone takes unusual courage. Moral courage is a rare and precious quality that distinguishes those who choose to do what's right, even when faced with overwhelming opposition. Unlike physical courage, which often emerges in moments of immediate danger, moral courage requires sustained commitment and the willingness to endure prolonged social, professional, and sometimes personal consequences. The cost of speaking up against wrongdoing can be severe. Whistleblowers often face ostracism, career setbacks, and even threats to their safety. Many find themselves isolated from colleagues, friends, and sometimes even family members who disagree with their decision to take a stand. The psychological burden of standing alone can be overwhelming, leading many to question their choices and struggle with anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. Yet history has shown us countless examples of individuals who demonstrated extraordinary moral courage. From civil rights activists who faced violence and imprisonment to corporate whistleblowers who sacrificed promising careers to expose corruption, these individuals share a common thread. They chose to act according to their conscience, despite knowing the personal cost would be high. Building resilience is essential for those who choose to stand alone. This involves developing a strong internal compass that remains steady even when external pressures mount. It requires cultivating self-awareness and understanding one's own values deeply enough to defend them when challenged. Regular self-reflection, meditation, or journaling can help strengthen this internal foundation. Support systems play a crucial role in maintaining moral courage. While standing alone often feels isolating, having even a small circle of trusted confidants can provide the emotional sustenance needed to persevere. These might include family members, close friends, mentors, or professional counselors who understand and support the ethical stance being taken. Practical strategies for maintaining conviction include documenting concerns and actions taken, seeking legal counsel when appropriate, and connecting with others who have faced similar situations. Knowledge of relevant laws, regulations, and ethical frameworks can provide additional confidence when challenging wrongdoing. Understanding one's rights and responsibilities helps in navigating complex situations while minimizing personal vulnerability. The ability to communicate effectively becomes particularly important when standing alone. This includes clearly articulating concerns, maintaining professionalism even in heated situations, and focusing on facts rather than emotions when presenting arguments. The way message is delivered can significantly impact its reception and the likelihood of gaining allies. Organizations and institutions often test moral courage through subtle pressures to conform. These might include implied threats to career advancement, social exclusion, or questioning one's loyalty. Recognizing these tactics helps in preparing for and responding to them effectively. Remember that resistance to ethical behavior often comes not from malice, but from others' fear of disrupting the status quo. Physical and emotional self-care become particularly important when standing alone. The stress of maintaining an ethical stance against opposition can take a significant toll on health and well-being. Regular exercise, adequate rest, and healthy lifestyle choices help maintain the energy and clarity needed for sustained moral action. The path of moral courage often feels lonely, but it's worth remembering that every positive change in human history started with individuals willing to stand alone. Their courage eventually inspired others to join them, creating movements that transformed societies. While the immediate consequences of standing alone may be challenging, the long-term impact often extends far beyond the individual, inspiring others and creating ripples of positive change that continue long after the initial stand was taken. Each person who chooses to stand alone for what's right strengthens the ethical fabric of society and makes it easier for others to follow. This collective courage, built one individual at a time, serves as a powerful force against the spread of evil and corruption in our world. Lesson 6. Evil thrives when good people stay silent. The deafening sound of silence often precedes the worst atrocities in human history. When good people choose to remain quiet in the face of wrongdoing, they unknowingly become accomplices to evil's progression. This phenomenon, known as the bystander effect, occurs when individuals witness harmful behavior but fail to intervene, assuming someone else will take action or fearing the personal consequences of speaking up. The collective responsibility we share as members of society extends beyond our immediate actions to include our responses to the misconduct we witness. Every time we observe unethical behavior and choose to look away, we contribute to a culture of permissiveness that allows evil to flourish. This passive participation emboldens wrongdoers and weakens the moral fabric of our communities, organizations, and institutions. Consider the workplace where financial misconduct goes unreported, the school where bullying persists unchallenged, or the neighborhood where discrimination festers without objection. In each scenario, the silence of witnesses serves as implicit approval, creating an environment where unethical behavior becomes normalized and increasingly severe. The perpetrators interpret this silence as acceptance, emboldening them to push boundaries further. Breaking the silence requires understanding the profound impact of our voice. Speaking up against wrongdoing serves multiple crucial functions. It directly challenges the unethical behavior, signals to others that such conduct is unacceptable, and empowers fellow bystanders to find their voice. When one person speaks up, it often creates a cascade effect, encouraging others to share their concerns and stand against misconduct. The consequences of collective silence extend far beyond the immediate situation. Organizations develop toxic cultures, communities become fragmented, and societies lose their moral compass when good people consistently choose silence over speaking truth to power. Historical examples abound of how institutional evil thrived because those who recognized wrong chose comfort over confrontation. Yet breaking the silence carries real risks. Whistleblowers often face retaliation, social isolation, and professional consequences. Understanding these potential costs is essential, but so is recognizing that the price of silence is ultimately higher. Each instance of speaking up builds resilience in our moral fabric and creates protective mechanisms against future wrongdoing. The path to breaking silence begins with small acts of courage. It might start with questioning a questionable practice in a team meeting, supporting a colleague who raises ethical concerns, or documenting observed misconduct. These actions, while seemingly modest, create ripples that can transform organizational cultures and social norms. Effective speaking up requires strategy and skill. It involves choosing the right moment, gathering evidence, identifying appropriate channels for reporting, and building alliances with others who share similar concerns. It also means being prepared for potential pushback and having a plan to protect oneself while pursuing what's right. Our voice becomes most powerful when we understand that silence in the face of wrong is not neutral. It is a choice with consequences. Every time we choose silence, we contribute to the conditions that allow evil to thrive. Conversely, every time we speak up, we strengthen the collective resistance against unethical behavior and create environments where good can flourish. The responsibility to speak against wrong extends beyond formal authority or designated roles. Each person who witnesses misconduct holds the power to challenge it. While the immediate impact of speaking up might not always be visible, the cumulative effect of consistent ethical voice creates substantial positive change over time. Evil's greatest ally is not the active participation of bad people, but the passive silence of good people who witness wrong and choose to remain quiet. Breaking this silence requires courage, wisdom, and persistence, but it remains one of our most powerful tools in preventing the spread of evil and protecting the moral character of our communities. Lesson 7. Small choices lead to big consequences. Every major ethical failure or moral catastrophe can be traced back to a series of seemingly insignificant decisions. The path to corruption or wrongdoing rarely begins with a dramatic leap into darkness. Instead, it starts with small choices that appear harmless at first glance. These minor decisions accumulate over time, gradually shifting our moral compass and ultimately leading to significant consequences that we never anticipated. Consider the case of a junior accountant who notices a minor discrepancy in the books, but decides to let it slide because it seems trivial. This initial choice might seem inconsequential, but it establishes a precedent. The next time a larger discrepancy appears, the threshold for what constitutes acceptable has already shifted. Before long, this pattern of overlooking financial irregularities could evolve into full-blown fraud, with devastating consequences for both the individual and the organization. Our brains are wired to focus on immediate outcomes rather than long-term consequences. When faced with a choice, we often underestimate how our current decisions will shape our future behavior and circumstances. This cognitive bias, known as temporal discounting, makes it particularly challenging to recognize the true weight of our seemingly minor choices. The manager who occasionally takes credit for a subordinate's work might not realize how this behavior gradually erodes team trust and creates a toxic workplace culture. The cumulative effect of choices operates like compound interest. Small decisions stack upon each other, creating momentum in either a positive or negative direction. Just as positive habits can build toward remarkable achievements, negative choices can accumulate into serious ethical breaches. A police officer who accepts a small favor might find themselves entangled in a web of corruption years later, wondering how they strayed so far from their original principles. Making conscious decisions requires developing awareness of this cumulative effect. It involves regularly stepping back to examine our choices, not just in isolation, but as part of a larger pattern. What precedent does this decision set? What door does it open? What message does it send to others? These questions help us evaluate the true impact of our choices beyond their immediate consequences. Decision-making patterns become particularly crucial in high-pressure situations. Under stress, we tend to default to established patterns of behavior. If we've cultivated a habit of making ethically sound choices in small matters, we're more likely to maintain our integrity when facing major decisions under pressure. Conversely, if we've developed patterns of cutting corners or compromising our values, these tendencies will likely manifest more severely during critical moments. Organizations and leaders must recognize the significance of small choices in shaping organizational culture. When leaders overlook minor infractions or reward shortcuts, they send powerful messages about what behavior is acceptable. These signals influence countless daily decisions made throughout the organization, potentially leading to systemic ethical issues that become increasingly difficult to address. The good news is that positive choices follow the same cumulative pattern. Each time we choose to act with integrity, even in small matters, we strengthen our ethical foundation. When we consistently align our actions with our values, we build momentum toward positive outcomes. The executive who always gives credit where it's due, the teacher who maintains high standards even when no one is watching, the citizen who speaks up against minor injustices. These individuals create ripple effects that influence others and contribute to a more ethical society. Understanding the connection between small choices and big consequences empowers us to take greater responsibility for our decisions. It encourages us to view each choice not as an isolated event, but as a building block in our character and future. By recognizing the weight of our daily decisions and consciously choosing integrity in small matters, we protect ourselves from the gradual erosion of our moral standards and build a foundation for ethical behavior that withstands greater challenges. Lesson 8. Anyone can fall without strong values. The path to ethical compromise is often paved with good intentions and weak foundations. History has repeatedly shown that individuals who lack firmly established core values are particularly vulnerable to moral deterioration, regardless of their initial good nature or intentions. This vulnerability stems from the absence of a moral compass that can guide decision-making during challenging times. Core values serve as an internal navigation system, helping individuals maintain their ethical bearings when faced with difficult choices or pressured situations. These values, when deeply ingrained, become the bedrock of personal integrity and help resist the corrosive effects of unethical environments. However, developing strong values requires more than simple acknowledgement. It demands conscious cultivation, regular reinforcement, and consistent practice. Building morale foundations begins with identifying and clearly articulating personal values. This process involves deep self-reflection and honest assessment of what truly matters most to an individual. These values must extend beyond superficial preferences to touch fundamental principles such as honesty, justice, compassion, and responsibility. The key is not just to list these values, but to understand why they matter and how they connect to one's sense of identity and purpose. Personal accountability plays a crucial role in maintaining ethical standards. Without accepting responsibility for our actions and their consequences, even the strongest values can erode over time. This accountability involves regular self-examination, willingness to acknowledge mistakes, and commitment to learning from failures. It requires individuals to ask themselves difficult questions about their choices and motivations, even when it might be more comfortable to look the other way. The challenge of maintaining ethical standards becomes particularly acute when facing situations that test our resolve. These tests often come in subtle forms, small requests that seem harmless but conflict with our values, or gradual shifts in workplace culture that slowly normalize unethical behavior. Strong values act as an early warning system, alerting us to potential compromises before they become major ethical breaches. Professional environments can present particular challenges to maintaining ethical standards. The pressure to meet targets, compete with colleagues, or advance in one's career can create powerful incentives to compromise values. Organizations may inadvertently or deliberately create conditions that encourage ethical shortcuts. In such environments, strong personal values become essential safeguards against moral compromise. Regular practice in ethical decision-making strengthens moral foundations. This involves actively seeking opportunities to apply values in daily situations, not just during major ethical dilemmas. When individuals consistently make choices aligned with their values in small matters, they build the moral muscle memory needed to handle more significant challenges. This practice also helps identify potential weaknesses in moral reasoning and areas where values need clarification or reinforcement. Value systems must also be flexible enough to evolve while maintaining their core integrity. As individuals gain experience and encounter new situations, their understanding of how to apply their values may deepen and become more nuanced. This evolution doesn't mean compromising fundamental principles, but rather developing a more sophisticated understanding of how to apply them in complex situations. Creating accountability systems can help reinforce values and ethical behavior. This might include regular reflection periods, discussions with trusted mentors or peers, or formal mechanisms for ethical review. These systems provide structure and support for maintaining ethical standards, especially when facing challenging circumstances or pressure to compromise. The process of maintaining strong values is ongoing and requires constant vigilance. Even individuals with well-established moral foundations must regularly reinforce their commitment to ethical behavior. This involves staying informed about ethical issues in their field, seeking feedback on their decisions, and maintaining connections with others who share similar values and can provide support and perspective. Lesson 9. Groups pressure people to do wrong. The power of group influence on individual behavior is one of the most significant forces that can lead good people down problematic paths. When surrounded by others who normalize unethical behavior, even those with strong moral foundations can find themselves compromising their values. This phenomenon occurs through several interconnected psychological mechanisms that work together to create powerful pressure for conformity. Group dynamics create an environment where individuals often subordinate their personal judgment to maintain harmony and acceptance within the group. This pressure manifests in subtle ways at first, perhaps laughing along with inappropriate jokes or remaining silent when witnessing minor infractions. Over time, these small compromises can escalate into participation in more serious ethical violations. The desire to be accepted and valued by the group becomes a driving force that can override individual moral standards. Peer pressure mechanisms operate through both explicit and implicit channels. Explicit pressure might involve direct requests or demands to participate in wrongdoing, often accompanied by threats of exclusion or ridicule for non-compliance. Implicit pressure works more subtly through social cues, body language, and unstated expectations. Many people find this implicit pressure particularly difficult to resist because it's harder to identify and challenge directly. The psychology of conformity demonstrates how individuals tend to align their behavior with group norms, even when those norms conflict with their personal values. Classic psychological experiments have shown that people will often deny their own accurate perceptions or judgments when faced with a group consensus that contradicts them. This tendency becomes even stronger when the group holds power over the individual's social status, career advancement, or economic security. Group influence becomes especially powerful in professional settings where team cohesion is valued and rewarded. Employees who raise ethical concerns or refuse to participate in questionable practices often face isolation, career setbacks, or outright hostility. The fear of these consequences can lead individuals to rationalize their compliance with unethical behavior as necessary for survival within the organization. To resist these pressures effectively, individuals need to develop strong internal mechanisms for maintaining their ethical standards in the face of group influence. This includes cultivating a clear understanding of personal values and boundaries before entering potentially challenging situations. It also requires developing the emotional resilience to withstand social disapproval and the potential consequences of nonconformity. Building alliances with like-minded colleagues can provide crucial support in resisting group pressure to engage in wrongdoing. When individuals know they're not alone in their ethical concerns, they're more likely to maintain their moral stance and potentially influence others to do the same. These informal networks can serve as alternative reference groups that reinforce ethical behavior rather than undermining it. Organizations can help protect their members from negative group influence by establishing clear ethical guidelines and creating safe channels for reporting concerns. When formal systems support ethical behavior and protect those who speak up, individuals feel more empowered to resist group pressure to do wrong. Leaders play a crucial role by modeling ethical behavior and actively encouraging dissent when ethical issues arise. Recognizing the warning signs of problematic group dynamics allows individuals to prepare themselves for potential pressure situations. These signs might include the presence of strong conformity demands, punishment of dissent, rationalization of unethical behavior, and gradual escalation of ethical compromises. By staying alert to these indicators, individuals can maintain their ethical awareness and prepare strategies for resistance before the pressure becomes overwhelming. Professional success should never require ethical compromise, yet group dynamics often create situations where individuals feel forced to choose between their values and their acceptance within the group. By understanding how group pressure operates and developing strong countermeasures, individuals can maintain their ethical standards while still functioning effectively within their professional and social environments. The key lies in building both the internal strength to resist pressure and the external support systems that make ethical behavior sustainable in the face of group influence. Lesson 10. Awareness is your shield against darkness. Moral awareness serves as our primary defense against the corrupting influences that surround us in daily life. Like a radar system that detects incoming threats, developing and maintaining heightened ethical awareness allows us to recognize potentially compromising situations before they overwhelm our defenses. This awareness begins with understanding our own vulnerabilities and accepting that none of us is immune to the subtle forces that can lead good people astray. The first step in developing moral awareness is conducting regular self-examination of our choices, behaviors, and motivations. This involves creating quiet moments for reflection, during which we honestly assess our recent decisions and their alignment with our core values. By making this practice habitual, we strengthen our ability to detect when we're starting to drift from our ethical foundations. Much like a captain constantly checking their navigation instruments, we must regularly verify that we're staying on our intended moral course. Prevention strategies built on awareness require us to identify our personal risk factors and situations where we might be particularly vulnerable to ethical compromises. Some people face greater temptation when under financial pressure, while others might be more susceptible to peer influence or the desire for status and recognition. Understanding these personal triggers allows us to establish appropriate boundaries and safeguards before we encounter challenging situations. One powerful way to maintain ethical vigilance is through the practice of mental rehearsal. By imagining challenging scenarios and planning our responses in advance, we strengthen our moral muscles and prepare ourselves to act appropriately when real tests arise. This might involve visualizing how we would respond to pressure from authority figures, handle situations where we witness wrongdoing, or maintain our integrity when faced with opportunities for personal gain at others' expense. Building a network of ethical supporters can significantly enhance our moral awareness. These trusted individuals serve as sounding boards, offering outside perspectives on our choices and helping us recognize blind spots in our ethical reasoning. They can also provide crucial support when we face difficult decisions, reminding us of our values and strengthening our resolve to do what's right. Environmental awareness is equally crucial in maintaining ethical vigilance. This involves staying alert to organizational cultures, social dynamics, and systemic pressures that might compromise our moral standards. By recognizing toxic elements in our environment early, we can take protective measures or remove ourselves from dangerous situations before they affect our behavior. Documentation serves as another powerful tool for maintaining awareness. Keeping a journal of ethical challenges and decisions helps us track patterns, identify areas where we need to strengthen our defenses, and maintain accountability to ourselves. This written record can also serve as a reminder of our commitment to ethical behavior during times of temptation or uncertainty. Regular exposure to ethical perspectives and discussions helps maintain our moral awareness. This might include reading about ethical issues, participating in ethics, focused training or workshops, or engaging in discussions about moral challenges with colleagues and friends. Such activities keep ethical considerations at the forefront of our minds and help us develop more sophisticated moral reasoning skills. Developing awareness also means learning to recognize and respond to physical and emotional signals that might indicate ethical danger. Feelings of discomfort, anxiety, or reluctance about certain decisions often serve as early warning signs that we're approaching an ethical boundary. Training ourselves to pay attention to these internal alarms helps us pause and evaluate situations more carefully before proceeding. The ultimate goal of cultivating moral awareness is to create an internal ethical compass that guides us automatically through daily decisions and challenges. This awareness becomes a protective shield, helping us maintain our integrity even in the face of powerful corrupting influences. By remaining vigilant and continuously strengthening our ethical awareness, we can better resist the darkness that threatens to lead good people astray and maintain our commitment to living according to our highest values.